Welcome, everyone. This webinar is being recorded. My name is Stephanie Johnny, and I'm with the Pete DuPont Freedom Foundation. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day today to join us for our E3 Lunch and Learn for the month of September. Today, we're going to be focusing all about marketing 101. Understanding the basics of marketing is just essential for any small business owner, any business owner in general. And so today we are being joined by NuPoint Marketing, one of our E3 vendors, who's going to cover a very brief, comprehensive overview of Marketing 101. They're going to be available here for questions. If you have a question throughout their presentation, please utilize the chat box. You can utilize the raise hand feature, and also or include your question in the Q&A function. Myself, as well as Chrissy Handley from PMG Consulting, will be monitoring the chat box, and we will make sure that we get to all of your questions at some point during the presentation. All right, so I don't know who's gonna start first, but NuPoint Marketing, the show is yours.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hi, it's Jim Donahue, and good afternoon, everyone. George, if you want to put up the presentation. Yeah, just go full screen. So while George is setting up there, again, my name is Jim Donahue, and before we start, I want to thank the Pete DuPont Freedom Foundation and E3, the E3 initiative. We're so happy to be part of this important initiative across Delaware. And I also want to say a special shout out to Peggy Geisler and Christy, our friends at PMG Consulting, for bringing us to the table on this important topic. So, Brand Marketing 101. Marketing is an enormous topic, and we're not going to but scratch the surface today. So keep that in mind, take some notes, and I'm sure there'll be a dozen topics that come up today that you'll want to learn more about, and we can go over that. So again, my name is Jim Donahue. I'm a managing partner and a co-founder of NuPoint Marketing. And we are based here in Wilmington with an office as well in Tucson. I'm going to cover marketing strategy and marketing planning, audience focus, and the SWOT, and I'll explain all that in a second. With me today as well are Jorge Del Fabro, who is our creative director and as well a partner in NuPoint, and Jorge is going to cover the importance of brand and cohesiveness of your creative in taking your business, whether it's a product or a service, to your customers and potential customers. And then Matt Urban, who is also a managing partner and a co-founder of NuPoint Marketing, is going to wrap us up with a discussion of the digital landscape and digital marketing, which is, in many respects, what's happening online is marketing as it is in 2021. So we will cover those topics pretty quickly. Each of us is going to take about 15 minutes, and then we should have 10, 15 minutes at the end for questions. Next, please, George. Thank you. Well, we've done that part, so I guess next. So who is NuPoint, and why are we here? NuPoint is a full-service, certified, woman-owned marketing, branding, and creative agency. Although from the three of us sitting here today with you, you wouldn't know, I guess, about the woman part, but you just have to take my word for it. We are. We have offices, as I said, in Wilmington. We're on Market Street. And as well, we have offices in Tucson, Arizona, where our CEO is, and her name is Mary Rowley. Mary won't be with us today, but she sends her best wishes from sunny Tucson. We like to think of ourselves as a client-focused, results-driven agency. All of the principals in the agency are partners, so there's not a project we're involved in where there isn't a partner at the table with the client. Collectively, our leadership team brings over 150 years of experience in marketing, both from the agency side and from the client side. So I, for example, have been in your seat as a business owner, and I know what that's like. So I bring that as well as a corporate background in marketing, and now, of course, as a partner in a marketing agency. So I've kind of done the 360 here. If you have any interest in learning more about us, you can check us out at NuPointMarketing.com. What are we doing today? We're going to, you jump that slide there, George. We're going to talk about strategy and audience, branding basics, and the digital presence, as I said. So let's get right into it. Strategy and audience. Yep. So what's more basic to any business than its customers? And what's more basic sounding than, well, the great place to start with marketing is to know your customer. Sounds basic. It's not really. There are so many moving parts to understanding your customer. Of course, the demographics of the customer base that you're trying to reach and where they are. Are they online? Are they in a store? Are you dealing with them in person? But really, when you do more than scratch the surface, understanding and knowing who your customer is has a lot more to do with reviewing and understanding data and analytics. So some of us have access to lots of data about who your customers are, or you may have access to who your customers are, that sort of data. Understanding that data and really doing a deep dive into the data is a great place to start when you're putting your marketing plan together. You have to look to previous successes. What has worked with your audience, your customer audience in the past? What have you done in the past that's worked? What have some of your competitors done in the past that has worked? And that's a key part of understanding and knowing your customer. All of that, you're jumping ahead on me, George.
Sorry, Jim.
All of that is a lot to do with building, and George will touch on this a little bit later in the presentation, is knowing your customer's persona, developing a buyer persona. What does your typical customer look like? What does he or she want? How do they want it? How do they want it priced? How do they want it packaged? Where do they want to see your product or your service? All of that adds up to what we like to call your buyer or customer persona. Okay, next, George. So again, all of it sounds basic, right? Well, again, it's not. Once you understand who your customer is, what that persona is, you need to understand how your product or service meets the needs of that customer's persona. Why do they need you? You have competition. You have plenty of people that are offering perhaps the same products or similar products or services to you. You need to develop what marketing folks call your USP, your unique selling proposition. What is it about your product that meets your customers' needs? And how does your customers' need, how is that need best served by the product that you offer, uniquely served by the product or service that you offer? All of this adds up to knowing your customer. George? Once we understand who our customer is, we need to understand who else is out there. Who are the people that are in your market area, your service area, your product area, that's also trying to reach the same customer you're trying to reach? Understanding them is critical. How do they market? What do you market that's different from them? How do you market in ways that reach customers in ways they're not trying? It all adds up to knowing your competition, knowing your customer, knowing your competition. All of that is an important baseline for developing a great marketing strategy. When we have our customers figured out and we have our competition figured out, we need to understand what our purpose is. What is our purpose at the table? How are we going to meet our customers' needs? How are we going to do it better than the competition does? What makes you different from your competitors? Sometimes we call these your strengths as an organization. And remember that S that you see, that's the S in SWOT. What do you need to do to fix or succeed? What are your weaknesses? What are those things about your business proposition, your unique selling proposition, that are weak? Where do you need to address some issue perhaps with your product, some issue perhaps with your service, where you're weak, where you need to have a heart-to-heart with yourself about what you are doing or what you are not doing that is a weakness in your product offering? What are your biggest potential wins? Where do you see opportunities for your business? That's the O in SWOT. And finally, the T in SWOT, where is it you're most likely to fail? What are those threats to your business? The threats are typically things that are outside your control, things as broad and diverse as the economy itself, perhaps some potential disaster that could affect your client base. Threats are typically things that you can't directly control, but which you need to be prepared for. So your strengths, what are your strengths? Let's define those. What are your weaknesses? Let's understand those things. What are the opportunities that you see for yourself and your business where you can make a difference with the products and services you offer? And where are the threats likely to emerge from? And the key here in all of this sounds simple again. You want to leverage your strengths. You want to fix your weaknesses. You want to know your opportunities, and you want to prepare for those threats that might come. So it all adds up to knowing yourself. So now we've talked about understanding and knowing your customer, understanding and knowing your competition, and understanding and knowing yourself. Now, I've made it sound pretty straightforward and easy. A lot goes into this. Next, George. When all of that is understood, it's time to sit down and take a clear-eyed look at your 3 Ps. What are your products or services? How do you want to price them relative to the marketplace, relative to your competition, relative to what your potential customer base will sustain? And how do you want to promote your business? Very often it's that last P in the 3 Ps of marketing that people think of most often when they talk about marketing. Things like advertising, social media, how you want to promote your business. And we will talk about those things, but getting engaged in the creative end of a marketing strategy is a lost cause if you first don't do your homework to understand your customer, understand your competition, and understand yourself. All of those things add up to that unique selling proposition that I mentioned a few moments ago. Next, George. So here we kind of bring it all together. What you want to do with your research strategy and marketing plan is to put yourself in that win zone, that blue box where you see the check. This is a Venn diagram. It's the confluence of what your brand does well, what your consumer wants, and what your competition does well. So clearly, we want you to end up in the winning zone, where you have made clear points of difference that meet the needs of the customers, and then you want to make the blue zone bigger than it is. What you want to avoid, of course, is the losing zone. That's where your competitor meets the consumer's needs and they do it better than you do. If you end up in that zone, your business is going to be crushed because they're going to beat you on price, or they're going to beat you on quality, or any number of other product attributes. Again, the importance of understanding those attributes before you even get into launching your product or service. Most people want to avoid, George, most people want to avoid the risky zone. There's a real competitive battle going on where customers, maybe they understand what you do well, but maybe they don't care about it, or maybe they think your competitor does it better than you do, but they're not certain. There's a lot of risk involved in that, and most small and mid-sized businesses really don't have the capital or bandwidth to take a risky bet here. So we want you to end up in the blue zone, and we definitely don't want you to end up in the zone where your competitors are eating your lunch. So now we can move on, George. So just to wrap up my portion of this discussion, know your customer, know your competition, know yourself, do your SWOT, understand your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and define your unique selling proposition. If you've done all those things and you've done them well, then it's time for you to think about how a brand might give you ownership over that relationship with your customer going forward. And so I'm going to turn the gavel quickly over to George.
All right. Well, after you do all that homework that Jim just went through, and it is a lot of work, you are basically ready to start the journey of creating a brand. And again, this is not what is a brand. A lot of people think that your logo is your brand or your slogan, your tagline, but really those are just marketing tools to support your brand, to support your goods or services, and to help sell them. But that's not really what your brand is. Your brand is how your customers recognize and experience your business. So again, it's not just your logo, it's everything from your customer's service style to your uniforms, your business cards, your marketing materials, your advertising. But but really it's every single touch point that your business has with its customers or potential customers, including attitude. One company that comes to mind is Chick-fil-A. Every time you go through a Chick-fil-A line, they always say, "My pleasure." And so, it's how you respond to customers, is how you treat them. It's not just your product and your service, but it's everything that encompasses what your business stands for. So important considerations in developing your brand. So after you go through the SWOT, after you understand your competitor, you need to establish these things I'm going to talk about in a second here. If for no other reason than so that everybody's on the same page, everybody in your company is on the same page and understands what your company stands for and how you want to move forward. So your mission, clearly communicates your brand's purpose and how it plans to serve its audience. You're going to do X or you're going to create Y. Your vision is sort of a long term. It's exactly what it says. It's vision. It's your long term impact you want to make with your mission. So basically, what are your objectives down the road? What do you want to do with your product or service? How do you want to help your potential customer or customer? And then your values, really important. It's what your company stands for. It's just like personal values. It's these are guidelines that create, basically, that encompass your actions, your behaviors, your decision-making process. And again, so that everybody's on the same page, you need to create these things and put them down in your style guide, which we'll get into in a minute. And that starts building on the consistency of your brand. So next very important thing is your brand promise. And a good example of that is FedEx's, when it absolutely positively has to get there overnight. That was their brand promise. Not sure if it still is, but another good example is Gore-Tex, guaranteed to keep you dry. So those promises, they've got to be compelling, they got to be a benefit, they have to be authentic, credible, and they have to be kept every time because they are exactly what we said they are. It's a promise. It's a promise you're making to your customer and your potential customer, and to retain credibility, you have to keep it. So then you can begin to think about positioning. So now that you have that, all that picture created, basically, of what your company is, what it stands for, what it represents, what it makes, or what type of service it offers, you've got to create a positioning statement. Basically, how do you project that brand out to your audience? For example, Apple, simplicity, creativity, humanity, their brand is all about those things. So that'll help you create your voice, and then it'll also help you create your visual presence. So developing a brand personality comes out of all that I just went over. Basically, a persona is just like basically a human characteristic that you're applying to your brand. Is your brand cheerful? Is it youthful? Is it dependable? Is it friendly? Is it responsible, etc.? So this will help you again begin to visualize what your brand looks like. So after all of those steps, the steps in actually creating the pieces for your brand are developing your voice, creating your content. So this is all the copywriting that needs to happen to to represent your products or services. It's how you speak, what kind of attitude, and basically being clear, to the point, and so basically establishing that that voice for your company. Then your visual identity comprises of a bunch of other parts, your logo being one of them. And in coming up with your logo and the rest of your visual presence, you need to consider colors, the psychology of colors, and also the hierarchy of colors. So once you establish, let's say, a particular color palette based on possibly the psychology of the colors themselves, and also, what are the contemporary colors that are being used now, other considerations like that, you need to develop a hierarchy of your color palette. In other words, you've got primary colors, you should have some secondary and possibly even tertiary colors. And so what I mean by that are, your primary colors would be the colors that you use most of the time. Your secondary colors might be for call out boxes or things like that. And then your tertiary colors could be just highlights and rules and, just small elements. So you kind of use them, you kind of build a hierarchy of how you use those colors. Other consideration would be the fonts that you're using, serifs and sans serifs. For those who don't know, serif fonts would be like Times Roman. They have the little feet, the top and the bottoms. And the sans serifs, what you're looking at right now is a sans serif font. They're straighter. They're a little easier to read, in my opinion, especially online. And they tend to be used more for headlines. They're bolder. And then you need to build a hierarchy for those fonts. What do you use for headlines? What do you use for subheads? What do you use for body text? Next thing to consider is your imagery. What types of images, what styles are you going to use? Illustration? Are you going to use photography? Is it going to be black and white photography, or is it going to be color photography? And so once you establish that, you should build a library of images, because you're going to need them, and you're going to need them all the time, and you're going to need them for everything. And basically your images should all be of similar style. Either if it's custom imagery and you're having a photographer shoot everything, well, then they should all be shot in the same style. If you're buying stock photography or illustration, again, they should all be in the same style or as close to the same style as possible. And some of the ways to do that, for example, if you pick, let's say you pick color photography, and it's all across the board, all different types of photography, but you want to try to tie them all together. There are different tricks you can use, like putting a color overlay over your images so that they're basically one color. They have like a tint to them. Would be one way to unify your imagery. And then you have to establish design criteria. And what I mean by that is, okay, so now you've got your colors, your logo, your fonts, your images. Now you need to actually start designing pieces, designing your website, your handouts, and what do they look like? So you need to establish that look. Once you've established that look, or at least know what direction you want to go in for that look, you can create your style guide. And your style guide are all of the rules that you've just established. What is your logo? How do you use your logo? How to use it black and white? How to use it in color? How to use it reversed out? What are your colors? What are your fonts? What style of images are you using? And you put all that together in a style guide, in a document. And then those rules will help everybody on your team be consistent. And that's the last thing on this sheet here is being consistent and how important that is. And basically, when you're getting sick of your brand because everything starts to look the same, that's when you know that it's actually resonating out there in the world, that that people are actually starting to beginning to recognize you, what your brand looks like, and what you stand for, what you represent. So, and then the other thing to consider is how your brand is going to evolve. What I'm showing you here are some examples of brand evolution. The tendency is for brands to simplify as they move forward. You can see, the original Nike, the original Apple, the original Starbucks, the original UPS were sort of convoluted. So when everybody tries to put everything in a logo that tries to tell you what your business is about, that would be the old approach. The new approach is more about creating an impression, and being simple about it, being consistent about it. And but the development of your brand is never really finished, or your brand becomes stagnant and will become outdated. So as time moves on, you need to keep in mind what's relevant, what's today, what are people interested in, and then figure out ways to evolve your brand to reflect all of those things. And that ends my part of the presentation.
All right, so now how does all this tie in with your digital landscape? So what I wanted to do is walk through some of the best practices and considerations here. And if you can move forward, George. So why is digital strategy important? Well, it used to be years ago that you would have your corporate strategy and digital strategy would kind of sit over to the side, and you would think about the website a little bit, and you'd try to push some content to the website. You might do some e-blasts, things like that. But as times evolved, really the industry has acknowledged that good digital strategy is business strategy and is marketing strategy, period. There's no separation between them. So a digital strategy is necessary to just get focus in your marketing efforts. And it just applies to the tactical steps to be taken on the digital realm. But digital strategy is marketing strategy, period. So you can't be thinking of this as something separate. It's got to be part of the thought process as you go through all of the aspects of getting in front of your customers. So a successful strategy is dependent on all the steps mentioned earlier. Anytime we're sitting down with a client, we go through some form of everything that we just talked through. Because we have to have a sense of what the purpose is and how we're going to utilize the tools. But first and foremost, all the platforms, the content, the focus, and all your activity there has to be audience focused, which is a lot of what Jim was talking about. And it has to be brand centric and look and tone, which is what George was talking about. So don't be there just because you should have a website. You be really mindful of your purpose. What's the awareness of your brand and your product currently? And obviously the online landscape is a good place to get additional brand and product awareness. You can get good credibility from making sure you've got a really good look and you've got a good compelling experience. You can engage people. You can focus on conversions or leads or sales of a product, or customer service and communication, and some form of all of that. And different platforms play different roles and have a better focus towards one goal or another. So that's part of piecing together the whole picture once you have an overall strategy. Move forward. So your website. The website is generally the hub of the digital landscape. It is not a means to an end, however. A lot of people think of it and treat it as a means to an end, but it's a piece of it, and it's generally the key hub of it. As you're thinking about your website, you want to be thinking about how it's going to grow and evolve over time, how you want to be, whether you want to be updating it yourself, how frequent the updates need to be, whether you want an outside vendor to be helping you with the updates. And that gives rise to some thoughts around what content management system or CMS is in place behind your website. Most people by now have heard of WordPress. WordPress is the most common content management system in use on the web today. That's not the only content management system that's out there, but it's certainly the biggest development community, and it's generally a pretty good choice. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have said that, but it's evolved in its scope and capability considerably. We used to not think of it as an enterprise level tool, but we have a lot more enterprise level organizations that are building websites within WordPress. Just like George talked about that a brand is always evolving, your website is always going to be evolving. So don't think of it as we have to have everything completely buttoned up and ready to go, and the whole story has to be there when we push go live day one. It's always going to evolve. But it's also important to keep it current, because if it doesn't evolve, then you're going to lose some positioning. You might not be found as easily in the search when people are searching for you, and your audience isn't going to want to have a reason. They're not going to have a reason to come back. There's a lot of basic tech that you need to be thinking about with your website. Analytics is a big one, looking at the kind of traffic that you're getting, where people are coming from, how many unique users are coming in any given month, what pages they're looking at, what their activity is there, and what their paths are through the website. That's going to tell you a lot about your audience and how successful you're being at connecting them to what you're trying to achieve with your digital strategy. Other things, forms. Do you need an intake form? You want people to sign up for a newsletter? Do you want people to sign up for a white paper or something like that? Where are those forms going to go? Do those forms tie into some other system? What are the transactional elements? Do you need a shopping cart? How many products do you have? What kind of categories? What kind of options for the shopping cart? And then there's a whole array of other custom plugins and considerations that come into a website. But it's always going to start with who is the audience, or who are the audiences? What are they trying to accomplish? And how do we best serve them? SEO is search engine optimization. It's critically important these days to have a good SEO strategy. That determines how you're found when somebody searches for a particular term. The best way to think about this is, and this is tried and true, content is king. Have good, focused, appropriate content that is of value, that's relevant to your business, your industry, and your audience. Keep it updated, keep putting new information up there, show that you're a lively place, and position yourself as an authority in a particular industry or service or product line. There's also considerations with regards to ADA and GDPR. ADA is Americans with Disabilities Act. If you are serving an audience that may have a high concentration of members that may have sight impairment, hearing impairment, you need to be factoring those things into your website. It's a good best practice anyway. If Google sees that you have factored this in, you're going to get some improvement in your ranking. GDPR, Global Data Protection Regulation, particularly pertains to individuals coming into a website from the European Union. And there are some disclaimers that need to get put on the website as to what happens with data that's captured on the site. making sure everybody's completely aware of what's happening with their data and letting them opt out of anything that they don't want anywhere they don't want their data to be captured. So these are just some of the considerations with regards to website. Moving on, the Google universe. 5-10 years ago, Google wasn't the big heavyweight. Now Google is basically it. There are so many tools and they are so robust and they are focused and valuable and they all fit together really well. That is a very, very, very good thing. Some of the things that you have that you can take advantage of within the Google universe is the ads, Google ads, and Google ads can be set for search. So if someone's searching for a particular term, you're buying a set of keywords and you are going to have an ad show up if they search. Similar to organic search, but you can kind of game the system by putting some money behind it. Display advertising lets you take your ads and put them over any number of different websites based on audience demographics, geographic filtration, any other number of different parameters. And remarketing, if someone has had some contact or some connection with your business, Google can help you record that and record that for you. And then you can follow that person with ads. I'm sure everybody's seen this happen in the past. You go to Amazon, you're looking for a vacuum cleaner. Next thing you know, everywhere you go, you're seeing ads for either that same vacuum cleaner or a whole bunch of other competing models. That's remarketing. Talked about analytics a little bit before. Google Analytics is a really robust platform that lets you get deep insight into how your site's being used. That now has been complemented with what's called Google Data Studio, which basically lets you set custom reports, build custom reports for yourself. So if you find that on a monthly basis, you're looking at just particular aspects of your traffic, you can build a Google Data Studio report, and then it'll automatically send that to you on a weekly, monthly basis, whatever frequency you choose. Why is all this important? There's a whole lot of benefit that you can get from this data tracking and analysis. The more you understand how people are using your digital tools, using your website, where they're going, the more it lets you help to direct your products, your services, and your go-to-market approach accordingly in response to that. And there's also a whole lot that can be done to look at overall costs. So if you're doing some advertising online, well, how much is it costing me to get what result? That's a lot of what these tools can tie together and really give you a clear picture of. Next slide. So social media. Social media is kind of always evolving. There's, everybody knows the standard Facebook, Instagram. Those are two biggies, but there's any number of different other platforms, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, any number of different ones. What's important is to really understand what audiences are congregating where. And each of those platforms has a particular kind of different focus and a different way that people think of it. So it's knowing what audiences are congregating there and understanding what they're doing there and how to embed your message and your presence in a way that feels typical to the experience of that particular platform. So that's one of the things that's really important when thinking about your social media strategy. Once you have a good sense of that, then what we always start with is putting together a publishing calendar. And we look at this typically on a month-to-month basis. We might take a year and say, let's talk about what our themes are for any given month. Is there anything that we want to hook into around holidays? Is there anything that's seasonal with this particular client? And then we put together a month-by-month publishing calendar of what's going to get published and when. Part of that is because you can often set those things and let them roll and put them in advance, have everything staged, and it automatically deploys, and then you don't have to be thinking about it every day to put those posts up there. The other thing that's really good with social media, particularly platforms like Facebook, is if you have customers, if you've created a whole pool of customers that are congregating there, that's a good place to be focusing on some customer service. And it's important to make sure that you've got standards there. You are going to get inquiries, and it's important to get standards together of who is going to be communicating back to those customers, what's the kind of tone that they're going to take, and what are some of the standard responses that you want them to have when they're confronted with a particular type of complaint or a really good review or a really bad review. How are you going to handle that? Paid advertising now, particularly on social platforms, is allowing you to do some really interesting dynamic targeting. One of the things, a lot of the platforms will let you filter on particular age ranges and geographics and things like that. But what Facebook in particular and Instagram to a degree are doing is you can feed it a bunch of emails of people that you say, this is my ideal customer profile, and it will help them build a list to specifically target others that have similar interests, which is a really, really great way to focus your budget. So there's a lot of kind of recent leaps in technology there. The other thing with social media is you really want to keep, a lot of people just think, well, okay, this post has been seen a number of times. That's great. It's all great if you get something seen, but there's definitely a difference between somebody just viewing something and engaging with it. And there's just different experience there, because in engagement, you're actually getting some kind of interaction with the person that's seeing the post. They might comment, they might do something, they might share something, they might forward something, they might click your link. That's really the kind of activity that you mostly want to be driving and striving for. Next slide. There's also been a lot of recent evolution, fairly transformative evolution with marketing automation, CRM, which is customer retention management, and outreach. And the whole point of this is staying connected with your customer. CRM systems, we talked earlier about forms on your website. If you have a form and you want somebody to sign up for a newsletter, once they're into your newsletter system, that newsletter list where you have that email address, that's a little mini CRM system. You know that customer, you can track how many times they have read one of your e-blasts, you can send new e-blasts to them, you can see what they've clicked on. You get a lot of data out of that. So it's staying connected. Marketing automation also helps with some of the set it and forget it kind of approach that I talked about with social media. So a lot of the marketing automation systems tie together e-blast, tie together social media postings, tie together connecting to tracking result through funnels and doorway pages. And what I mean by funnels and doorway pages are if you have a particular product and you want to market around that particular product, if you set up a page that's very action oriented, that's intended to either sell that thing or get a lead for something, that's very, very specifically focused on getting the user to take that action, and it's only focused on that, that's a funnel or a doorway page. And a lot of the marketing will be more successful if you point them to that focused page rather than just generally sending them to a website where they have to go and find that information for themselves. E-blast, there's any number of different e-blast platforms out there, Constant Contact, MailChimp, others. Again, you want to be trying to capture as many email addresses as you can, having those people in your customer pool, getting them to sign up easily. And you want to be thinking consciously about what the frequency is. You want to be sending them messages, what the content is, how you're going to potentially customize that for the user. Because a lot of these systems, both with funnels and doorways and marketing automation and e-blasts, will let you set up a basic template and then give you some options that will automatically paste in based on what it knows of that particular user. So if somebody's expressed a preference for one part of your product line versus another part of the product line, you can make sure that when you're sending them an e-blast, it's going to talk about just the part of your product line that's interesting and appealing to them, that they want to know about. The other thing that we're starting to use more and more is some text messaging platforms. You've seen these. Text this 5-digit, text yes to this 5-digit code. Next thing you know, you're signed up to get text e-blasts. That's another way that you can have direct and quick communication right to your customers and engage them. And that's something that's being more and more seen. Next. So tying it all together, this is all about piloting the ship. This is about being focused and saying, what's the outcome I'm trying to drive, and not just doing the stuff to just be out there and have the activity. You'll be thinking consciously about the strategy, you'll be a lot more efficient, you'll drive a lot more results. This all will let you ideally get down to a really clear cost per lead or cost to sell a particular product. With some of the reporting that we do for some of our clients, I'm able to go through and say, this is exactly how much you spent to market this particular product line. Here's all the leads from all the sources that you've got. Here's what the cost is for each one of those leads. Now they can then take that and say, all right, so if it costs us $22 to get a lead, and if we get 10 leads and we close one of them, and the value of that one lead that's closed is $2,000 or $200, then I know that that's a valuable investment because that is showing the result that we're looking for. So it starts to become a science, and that's what is really beautiful about the digital landscape, is being able to prove the result in that way. But that said, a lot of it is measured experimentation. You don't always know what you're going to get as a result once you go into it. So you want to do measured experiments. Try some A/B testing. Try 2 different versions of an e-blast. Send one version and another version to a subset each and see which one gets the highest engagement. Same thing on social media. Same thing with advertising. And when you find those things that are successful, then you reinvest in those. And what you do is you create repeatable success, and then you have efficiency increases over time. And it's all about driving that lifetime customer value and staying connected with them. And I think that's probably all I have in my slides. Yeah, that's my piece of this. And on behalf of the entire group, thanks for listening, and we can open up to whatever questions you might have. I know that was a fire hose of information in a 45-minute period of time.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I was trying to put myself in the seats of those who are listening to this and thinking, wow, it can seem overwhelming. But once you start getting a handle on some of those basics that I talked about early on, knowing your customer, knowing your competition, walking through your SWOT, getting those basics done is an important foundation for all of this, leading into defining your brand persona and, of course, your digital strategy. So it can seem overwhelming, and there certainly are a lot of moving parts, but all of this can be scaled for different size organizations, and having people to help you walk through that stuff is useful sometimes. So yep, I think we're open for questions, Stephanie, if there are any.
Yep, we do. We have one hand that's raised. Nicole, go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephanie. NuPoint, this was amazing. So much great information. I really appreciate it. I love the breakdown and the correlation between like the SWOT analysis with even the pricing to the branding structure. I thought that was really, I've never heard it delivered quite like that before. And it made me really think about our brand messaging. I kind of do all of our materials right now for HX Innovations, the startup that I'm involved with. And so this is actually helping me. I usually plan it out for the month, but this will help me kind of fine tune it. So, but my question was with the pricing. Now, what does the pricing have to do with the branding? You mentioned pricing when you were talking about the SWOT analysis, knowing your competitors and knowing your, yourself as a brand. What does pricing have to do with that?
Well, I think pricing is, and George and Matt, please jump in here. The way you price your product is an outgrowth of all of the research and analysis that you may have done, or hopefully will have done, in putting your brand persona together. So, for example, George walked us through how those various brands or those logos transitioned over time. They have positioned themselves, Starbucks, let's use that example, as a high-end product with a price that reflects it. So if any of you are like me and you're spending far too much money on a cup of coffee every day, Starbucks has really put some thought into how they price their products, and that their brand reflects that. So when you think of Starbucks, you think of high-end coffee, and their in-store pricing reflects that. They have thought that through. They've done the research, and they know that their client base is going to be responsive to the pricing of their products. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. Whereas, Joe's coffee shop on the corner, pricing maybe not so important. Maybe pricing low price is his entry point into the market. And there's a place for Joe's coffee shop on the corner. So when we think about pricing, we have to think about where it fits in the overall brand persona, what we're reaching for, who are the clients we're reaching for, what price elasticity do they have? Will they pay $5 for a cup of coffee, or are they more the, 75 cents, $1 for a cup of coffee? You're not going to know that if you go out there and just hope for the best. You have to think that through. So pricing is an important part of the overall brand persona. Not sure if that answered your question, or Matt or George, you want to jump in?
I think that was a great answer.
Yeah, no, that was extremely helpful. And it helped clarify exactly what I thought you meant by it. And so I'm glad that that I was at least on the right train of thought. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Nicole.
We do have a couple other questions. So this was a great overview, and it did make it seem very simple and straightforward, but as we all know here that it's much easier said than done. So if a new entrepreneur completely starting from scratch, does not have, any marketing background or knowledge, when they're approaching either NuPoint Marketing or another marketing firm, what should they come prepared with? Should they have their SWOT analysis completed? Should they know who their audience already is? Or what would help them in working with you or someone like you?
I'll try to field this. We get clients that come to us at any stage in the spectrum. Some have done strategic plans, some have very well-documented go-to-market approach, and they're looking for tactical execution and creative. Some are really just getting started. I think that if I had to boil it down to one key thing, it's know your audience. If you know your audience and how who you're trying to reach, then we can work with you from that point. Sometimes we will do a SWOT so we can get focus and start to create a marketing plan. Sometimes we don't need that because they've already got a marketing plan. But generally, in all cases, our first conversation is, who are you trying to reach? Who are your audiences? Tell us as much about them as you can.
Yeah, and that's right, Matt. And I'll just build on that a little bit. And as Matt said, we meet, and I think most other agencies will meet the client where they are, and we'll walk them through a process to get where they need to be. And knowing your customer, knowing your audience is the starting line. I have found in my experience that whether it's a large research project, we just completed an enormous research project for a client that many of you would probably recognize in the nonprofit arena in Delaware. And they, I think, reached out to some 16,000 of their key stakeholders in this research project. And that, of course, was a great thing for them. They had the budget and the bandwidth to afford that. Not everybody can do that. Sometimes it's as straightforward as sitting down and having a SWOT discussion with a business owner and his or her, one or two key people to walk them through I call a SWOT a guided discussion. And to have a guided discussion about their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. A SWOT is not a magic bullet. It's certainly not something we invented, but it has a way of clearing the mind, of helping people understand where the starting line is for them and what they're most likely to see success from for even a limited budget. So particularly if you're on a limited budget, the last thing you want to do is try 100 things that might work and hope one of them sticks. You really want to focus your spend in an area where you have good reason to believe you're going to get some traction. And I've always found that is best coming out of a SWOT discussion. Doesn't have to be rocket science or brain surgery. Sometimes it's just sitting down with the key principals in the company and hearing them out and guiding them through that discussion and putting it down on a piece of paper and really drawing them out and being candid about it, particularly when it comes to those weaknesses. Clients don't typically like talking about their weaknesses, but I recommend that we spend a fair amount of time there. So if you had one thing you got to come to the room with, it's knowing your audience and what you believe they want from your business, and then having that SWOT discussion. All of that will be a great revelation for your business, whether it's in the marketing arena or any other arena, even in the financial and operational area. SWOT can have lots of hidden gems come out in SWOT discussions that don't only have application to marketing.
Thank you. Peggy, I think you have a question.
Well, it's sort of a comment. So I think one of the things, and I really, really appreciate you gentlemen taking the time to do this, and we'll probably have you back again because you know I'm an opportunist. So I'm going to ask right in front of everybody. But here's the thing. We could take a deeper dive on any one of these issues. And I think there are some other opportunities there in the future, and we should probably think about that. But I think there's other things that we can do as an E3. So if your organization is looking for a mentor in one of these areas, we have some ability to do some of that. Like if you need some one-on-one coaching or guidance, or if you want to work through us to get to one of these vendors that can support you in this, we can help provide you with that opportunity. It may be you're just going in and getting your feet wet and want to just a little bit of time from NuPoint or from another organization, or you might need something else. And reaching out to our infrastructure, we can help guide you with that and support you through that. And Stephanie and myself and then some others are here for that reason. I think really appreciate NuPoint's being here today. I know Stephanie's going to probably close it out there, and you may have other questions. Put them in the chat box now. We can make sure that the gentlemen respond or get you some information directly from NuPoint if your question didn't get answered here today. We know that this was just an hour. But in the future, if there is something, they can reach out to you, maybe give you some answers or some guidance, and we would be glad to link you directly with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we do have a bunch of questions. I think Peggy brings up a great point that there's so many key topics here that deserve its individual hour session. And as Peggy mentioned, and honestly, as Nicole mentioned, her business, that's her business is one of the businesses entering E3 as we speak right now. This is a key need for a lot of the entrepreneurs coming in through E3. And so I love the fact that NuPoint Marketing answered that question, because that kind of shows it doesn't matter where you are in your journey, we'll be able to help you out where you need the assistance. One thing before we close out, I love the fact that you guys pointed out that you don't have to be everywhere. And a lot of times when you're a new entrepreneur, or even if you've been in business for the past 10 years, with all of these new social media channels coming out, you feel like you need to have one, and you feel like you need to have a presence there. And so I think it's important that you said that, so we can kind of relay that message. You may not always know where the right fit is. And that's something a marketing firm or another firm within E3 can help you determine and decide where the right fit is for you. So as I mentioned in the chat box, we are at time, unfortunately. So as I mentioned in the chat box, later today, this recording will be available on the Foundation's YouTube channel. I'll include that link once again. Everybody who attended today, thank you so much for joining. If you have not already done so, please subscribe to our e-newsletter through our website to stay up to date on everything that's happening with E3, including additional lunch and learn sessions that we have planned for the remainder of the year. We're also going to be, Peggy did a little kind of drip about our E3 membership that it has been launched, that we're continuing to work on. Everybody who applies to be part of E3 automatically gets a membership trial. And that's something that we're going to be including more information about in our newsletters, our upcoming newsletters as well. But if you have any questions, I'll put some of our contact information in the chat box. Please feel free to reach out to myself,